Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Welcome to the metropolitan elite, I suppose I should say. The City of Manchester, Salford. I'm Christian Gurumurthy. I normally do Channel 4 News, but I'll be your chairman through the course of this morning. You've got a fantastic programme of speakers and discussion ahead of you, but what I would say is that it totally depends on you and your participation as well, because from very early on this morning, I'm going to be looking to you to help us drive this conversation. And what a time to be having a conversation about finding true north, where the Northern Powerhouse's champion, George Osborne, may be looking at the end of his frontline political career, possibly, we don't know. So who's going to take up that role? Who's going to champion this whole idea at the heart of government? Well, maybe Greg, who is here to talk to us this morning. We also have Dan Jarvis, Sir Richard Leese and Ivan Lewis in this morning's discussions. But we're going to kick off really by hearing more about how you reconnect these towns and cities and the people who live in them with power and with money and with the growth that they generate themselves. So please welcome the Director of Res Publica, Phillip Blond.
Well, hello everybody, and a great pleasure to have you here. It's a strange time, frightening time. I remember sort of the night of the Brexit vote. I don't know about you, but I thought the weather knew something we didn't know. It was clear that tumultuous times were upon us. And indeed, it's clear that those areas that voted for Brexit, mainly those outside of London, are those areas that are actually most intimately connected with the EU and with the economy, and so will suffer more than London will from leaving the European Union. We're also at a time when both of the major parties are in transition. We're going to have a new Prime Minister and a new government. And the Labour Party, well, there might even be two Labour parties. Who knows quite what will happen? And the thing that I fear most in all of this is what will happen to the North. Because if the North recedes once more from public consciousness, if once more it's lost from our regard and our concern, the cost, I think, could potentially be close to terminal. If we lose the Northern Powerhouse, because its greatest champion, as Christian put it well, recedes from frontline politics, we lose the hope of turning it around. And I just want to give you, and I'm not by nature a depressive or depressing person, but I'd like to begin by just talking about some sobering statistics that I think outlines the scale of the challenge and where we must go. And then I want to talk about what we indeed plan to do. It might surprise you to know that 47% of the UK population live in areas as productive as the former East Germany. Some in the UK live in areas less prosperous than Mississippi, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. And internal divergence within countries is now greater than divergence between countries. Now, many of those areas that are as productive as East Germany are indeed in the north. Let me just outline from a range of sectors and a range of areas some of the issues that we face. From education, the early years gap between children from poorer and wealthier homes, and you'll know the oft-mentioned statistic that the least able child at age 7 the least able child in a cohort overtakes the most able child in the lowest cohort by age 7. Well, that gap is twice as wide in the north as it is in the south. The adult population in the north, with the higher level qualifications, 31%, lags behind significantly London at 49% and the southeast at 40%. Overall life expectancy in the north is 5 years less than those in the south. And perhaps even more worryingly, a baby girl born in Manchester can expect to live for 15 fewer years in good health, and all the costs that that means, than a baby girl born in the London borough of Richmond. There isn't a single local authority across the whole of the North East, Yorkshire and Humberside, that are in the top 20% of social mobility hotspots. i.e., if you are born there or reside there, the likelihood is nothing very much will change for you. London is growing nearly twice as fast as the north, and business density in the north is often half that of that in the south. For instance, the southeast has 122 businesses for every 10,000 adults. Yorkshire and the Humber, 879 businesses, and the northeast, only 629. According to the Times Higher Education World University Surveys, the region contains 23 universities, 6 of which rank in the top 20 for national UK research, but there are no universities in the top 50 for world-class universities, and only 3 in the top 100. Frighteningly, the unemployment rate in the north, and this is from NOMIS, the unemployment rate in the north at 6.1% is higher than 10 years ago, at 5.7%, and above the national average, which is basically the same as it was 10 years ago. These are just a range of some of the issues that we face and some of the problems we must tackle. So what are we going to do and where are we? What I fear is that if we stay as we are, and in many ways it's been a transformative approach to the North in recent years, thanks in no small part to Greg Clark, who's here with us today, and thanks to many of you, leaders of LEPs, leaders of councils. What we've achieved with city-based devolution is, I think, the beginning of the turnaround. And if you look at Manchester, and we at Res Publica wrote the founding report for that, for Devo Manc, it was our idea also to devolve health to Manchester. The ship can turn. The northwest is actually showing, for the first time in the entire north, a net increase in population. Things can shift around. Things can turn. And actually, if you look to the OECD, they say the only regions that can catch up, once they're so far behind, are those that trade, that operate globally. If you don't operate globally, there is no hope for you. So this sets the agenda for us. What I think we need is an even more radical approach than the very radical approach we followed. I think we need a whole council for the North. For the whole of the North, we need whole place solutions, we need whole place investments, we need whole North place decisions. For instance, the government, rightly and thankfully, is doing a North-wide economic survey to find out where the innovations are, what we're good at. And the question is when we have that, what do we do with that? How do we coordinate between excellences in Newcastle or Leeds and Sheffield? What are the national or regional decisions, rather, that we must make? Who do we support? Where do we direct resources? There isn't sufficient governance capacity there to actually coordinate all the incentives. And what we need if we're going to turn around the North is a whole region-based analysis of what the incentives are for business, for growth, for innovation, for health, for skills, for education. We need to align all of the incentives to create whole systemic turnaround. That has to be our agenda. And instead of fighting between different localities, what we need is northern leaders and the new moralities and the mayors who will come into that new office to raise their sights and create a whole new total North, if I can use that expression, offer. So in the Res Publica manifesto for the North that we've released this morning, we have a whole host of ideas, and this is by no means we want this fixed. We want to add to it, and we want to learn from your ideas. But let me just skip quickly through each of these areas and pick some exciting ones. The North is so dependent on welfare. that for me it is striking that we haven't yet had from any of the devolved authorities any new ideas on welfare, any asks for what they can do on welfare. What we argue for is the devolution of Job Centre Plus. We want earn-back schemes so that if councils, not welfare-to-work providers, if councils can help broker people into work, that they retain some of the national insurance that those people generate, that they can help grow those areas. Unless we can truly broker this shift from welfare into work, give incentives to local councils and local areas to do that, and also encourage the councils and the local authorities to recognise their crucial role in this regard, we will always have a group of people who remain permanently on subsistence and on entitlement. And you cannot grow these economies if you leave people like that. We assess just in Manchester alone, if our advice was followed, £1 billion a year could be saved. And we think this saving should go also to local authorities. In terms of teaching, I'm with and my colleagues at Res Publica who've just written a brilliant paper on education in Knowsley. All the evidence shows that the thing that matters for education is the institutions, is teaching themselves. We want a whole North teaching premium. We want a new offer for teachers that attracts the very best teachers. That should include less bureaucracy, more ability to teach according to your inclination and charisma within the confines of the national curriculum. We want help with loans, help with housing. We want help with student debt. We want also universities to integrate with schools. We want PhD students who are awarded PhD funding to have as part of the condition of their award to teach in schools, because then the very latest teaching will be injected into the staff room and we will start to re-intellectualise schools and create an idea that schools once more are agents and institutions of transformation. Because one of the messages of the Brexit vote is that people in these areas don't have any institution that can transform their lives and transform their outcomes. And we have to do that. I also believe, and it's in our manifesto, that we need a Cambridge or an Oxbridge of the North. All the research suggests that what you need as a university is an applied technology university, an MIT, and we've said we need an MIT of the North. We need a world-class university that specialises in applied technology in the North, around which businesses can group and around which industry and spin-outs can take place. Now, I would like the government to go to Oxford and go to Cambridge and suggest a joint shared campus in the North. After all, the French have already done it under Mitterrand, and that was a success. They distributed their Grand Écoles across all of France. It worked. We need something similar. We need educational and university excellence in the North. The best university that we've got in the North, the University of Manchester, itself was promoted by the vision on the part of the then Chancellor, who then argued for unification. But we need to go more. We need to press. We need a top 10 world-class university in the North. We also need to create a world in which the North is where you go if you're clever, if you're talented, if you have real ability. We need a post-40s offer so that we can attract people back from the southeast that has many disadvantages as well as advantages and pull them back to the north. One of the reasons people will want to come back is housing that is so extremely expensive. It now creates asset traps of real poverty if you can't have access to them. This is a huge moment where the North could actually pull in real talent. We want pan-northern housing redevelopment schemes that allow us to capture land value, for example, in South Manchester, and apply the surplus from that land value in northern Tyneside. These type of equalisation measures across the North are what we need to grow, because we know that the North doesn't have the housing it needs. It desperately needs more middle-class housing, but what it has is working-class housing from the last century. That's a massive remodernisation, but we're not going to do it because the housing needs in the south are so extreme. Unless we come up with mechanisms of our own in the north, this isn't going to be achieved. Health. My colleague Emily Crawford has written several decisive pieces on health and social care, and she tells me that, and she's right, that if we want to affect health outcomes, the health service only affects 20% of health outcomes. So if you've got £100, funding the health service will only give you a 20% impact. What we can't capture is all the other impacts on health. And we know people in the north die earlier, have worse, much worse health indices than those in the south. How do we capture the other 80%? Well, what we at Res Publica recommend are whole family interventions on health, just like we've done with troubled families to great success. We need whole family interventions on health. And we need the government to fund a Kickstarter approach to community health interventions. 70%, that's 70, of all NHS bed days are taken up by the chronically ill, those with diabetes, dementia, obesity, etc. 70% of all NHS expenditure is consumed with the people with those needs, and yet we have no real effective institutions to meet those needs and stop them going into hospital. Energy. Shale gas is proof, not just that God's an Englishman, but he's undoubtedly born in the north. We have the Boland Shale that has one of the greatest reserves of shale gas, arguably, in the world. Shale gas is the intermediate fuel that's far less carbon intensive than coal. If we can operationalize and develop that in a clean and safe way, and there's no technological reason why we can't, we can create the north as a low energy space that can attract the type of high-value industry that we desperately need. Transport, we at Res Publica have long argued for an east-west line. I was delighted to hear that Sheffield has got its own spur. We argue for this for Liverpool. We came up with a scheme whereby Liverpool could finance half of the cost of HS2/HS3. Unless we solve the North's transport problems, it won't happen. Innovation is key to production. At the dinner we had yesterday evening, there was some brilliant ideas from colleagues in Manchester Growth and Accenture. We need a northern-wide innovation competition where cities put up their problems on a whole north basis and ask businesses to solve them. That would create an enormous amount of innovation in government procurement. Culture. We need a whole North culture czar. I know that sounds very totalitarian and vaguely frightening, but unless we can coordinate the cultural resources, and remember, the cultural resources in the North are infinitesimal compared to the South. £4.91 per head in the North for culture, £65.18 per head in the South. If we can have a whole North offer for culture, we can decide which cities specialise, where you might go. We can create an environment that people from all around the world would want to move to and locate to and live in. Finally, what I want to talk about is what a whole North offer would be and why we desperately need a council for the North. One of the things that's depressed me slightly is too few of the local authorities have really pursued radical public sector integration and radical whole person reform. It's absolutely imperative that we do this. And I think the government should pressure local councils more, and local councils themselves should face a higher bar than they currently do. And I think a council for the North can help create the agenda for the public service transformation in the North that we need to help move those from low skills and no work into a better, more flourishing future. I also argued that we need an offer akin to the New Deal that Roosevelt offered America. I actually think we need a no-tax North. By that I don't mean entirely no tax, but around business, around growth, we need to, for instance, not tax businesses where on plant, on machinery, on investment. We still need redistribution from London because London generates such an enormous amount of tax, wealth and revenue. But we need to create a no-tax world for northern businesses in order to encourage people to relocate. And when people do relocate to the north, we need to say to them things like, all of your relocation costs, all of them can be written off against tax. We need to localise things, environmental taxes or any form of business tax that we still want to levy in order that local councils can curate that. Unless we do this, unless we create a new whole North offer, we're not going to see the type of transformation and turnaround that we desperately need to see. And what I would like to see local councils and people, it needs to become a popular movement, is the North needs to start operating like a nation, just like the Scottish do, just like the Welsh do. We need to create whole North asks, whole North demands, because unless we do that, we will not turn this part of our country around. And the gains from turning it around are absolutely massive and absolutely transformative. We need ideas that stop graduates, our best, our most talented, leaving at scale because they feel they can't get jobs or opportunities here. One of our proposals is we create whole sectoral job training programs so that within a sector you can train in one company and then move to another and then move to another, so that our graduate offers are better than any graduate offers they get in the South. And we need to create incentives for universities to retain people in their area and councils to retain those graduates in their area. Unless we can do this, unless we can realign all of these ideas, we are not going to turn around the North. But the North can turn around. It's already turning around. In certain parts and certain places, there are very bright lights that are world class. We need to bring these together so they don't become single points of light communicating to one another, as Auden put it, but actually a whole show that can transform this region and make it, as we enter now the world of distant, opulent shores that Brexit promises, well, let's make good on that promise. Let's become this world-class centre that doesn't tolerate mediocrity, that demands excellence, that coordinates all incentives, makes the right radical demands of government to turn around all of our prospects, from Northern Ireland through to the North, up to Scotland, whole North. But let's start here. Thank you very much.
Philip, let me just pick you up on a couple of things before we move on, and then we'll open it up to a wider discussion with everybody in a little while. I mean, there are lots of contradictions at the moment in terms, if you look at what happened in the referendum. You know, you had a very high democratic participation, but a huge number of people also saying they're very fed up with the way politics is working and the way elite's working. What you're proposing clearly involves a lot more politics, a lot more structures. Why do you think more politics is the answer to the situation we have now in terms of disaffectation? And isn't there a risk that you will simply replicate the divisions, that you will have more divisions between Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Newcastle, and the towns in between?
I think politics, I think someone once said, is what you do when you don't have warfare. And the cost of warfare is pretty fatal. And outside of politics, things will remain as they are. Enmities will build, injustices and inequality will become ever more entrenched. So politics is the only way out of this. The depressing fact is that what people are protesting about, many of their local politicians can't control. This, arguably, Brexit was the world's biggest vote against globalization. And we know globalization doesn't benefit, to put it mildly, the working class in the Western world. It benefits the working class in the developing world, but not in the developed world. In fact, it erodes their jobs, erodes their skills, their values. They become unemployed and unemployable. So this protest against distant elites is actually a protest against elites who arguably didn't do enough. The European Union didn't do enough to protect people. But the only way to do enough is actually to work close to home and create the incentives that can actually propel yourself to a different future. You know, I was born in the North, you were born in the North, Greg was born in Middlesbrough, and we all had to leave to pursue our careers and our directions. There's no need for that. That's not written in nature. We can create something by working together and creating a whole host of local incentives. We have the money, we have the ideas. What we don't have is the political will. But the political will is there, I think, with the new government. We lost a chancellor who actually, I would argue, in terms of the Northern Powerhouse, was very good for the North. It's imperative that Northern leaders actually impress upon the new Prime Minister and the new government that the Northern Powerhouse has to actually be at the front and centre of any government policy, any government offer, because without that it won't change and all the long-term trends will continue. But evidence shows policy can make a difference and politicians can make a difference, and that's what we need. We need the idea of total systemic turnaround.
Okay, well, there's lots to pick up and we'll come back to it in a moment, but Philip, thank you very much. Come and have a seat.